Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host today, Alan Peterson, Executive Director of the Compassionate Friends. Heidi was out of town, and Alan's here, and I'm so happy to have you on, Alan.
Well, it's always great to be here and fill in for the great Dr. Heidi Horsley. I do my best, but I certainly am no match for her. But I'm excited to be here. We have a good show today.
We do. We do. It's an important show that you're going to hear today because it's going to be on substance abuse. And we have some wonderful women on who have lost children to substance abuse, and they're going to have some great thoughts and ideas for you. And I just wanted to go over some of the statistics with you. We had Gary Mandel, you know Gary.
Right.
And he has an organization called Shatterproof, and one of our ladies is an ambassador for Shatterproof. But I wanted to give you some of the statistics that Gary has on his site about substance abuse in the United States, because I think it's really important, Alan. Did you know, Alan, that 136,000 people a year in the United States die of substance abuse?
Yeah. These type of losses are equal now to automobile accidents, and it's just really it's an epidemic. I think both of our guests are going to really shed some light on that, talk about their own experience with it and some of the things that are going on that we're trying to do as a country.
Right, and to try to end this thing, and I know a lot of you are thinking about your family members. 22 million people suffer from addiction in the United States.
Wow.
22 million, Alan.
It's amazing.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, if you scratch the surface, who out there has not had somebody or doesn't know somebody close who's got a substance abuse problem or who's maybe even died of a substance abuse problem?
Yeah, so I mean, it touches us all. So I'm excited. It's a kind of a tough subject to take on, but we're going to do it today.
Absolutely, and we've got some people that you know from Compassionate Friends. Do you want to introduce them?
I would. I'd like to introduce our guest today, Lance's mom, Nancy Jiraka. Welcome, Nancy, and Diana Lynn, and you're Josh and Logan's mom. And both of you have been touched personally by this loss, and I think we'll start out with Nancy and talk a little bit about your son Lance and substance-related loss and how that affected your life.
And you know one thing, Alan, which I'm going to love that Nancy's going to do, is we want to hear about how they lived, too.
Yes, we do.
Which is an important thing.
Yes.
And who they were.
Yeah.
Well, Lance was quite a kid growing up. He was so much fun, creative. He was always like a leader. I got the greatest note from one of his teachers. It was on a thing that usually teachers write something bad. Well, the teacher said, I can't believe I'm going to get a chance to write something amazing, that Lance is like a born leader. He follows through on all his projects that I give him, and he's always willing to help. So that was the kind of a kid he was. If you had to ask me if Lance would have died the way he did, I would have said, actually I wrote a poem called Not Lance, because it was like, I would have never thought that Lance would have died the way he did.
And he died of substance abuse, but an automobile accident,
Right.
But he had really become quite the abuser. And he went to NYU Film School, right? I mean, you told me a story about him, which I thought was amazing. The fact that he didn't even graduate from high school, and yet he was able to write an essay or something, a
Yes.
letter, and get into NYU Film School, which was amazing. And then he became a film producer, right?
Yes.
Didn't he produce a film? What was it?
He, when he was in film school, he produced a film called Time's Up, which just the name is. At the time, he wasn't an alcoholic or a drug user, but it was about 2 generations of a family that was dealing with the father's alcohol abuse.
Wow.
So it's kind of, when you think back, the fact that I never really asked them. It wasn't the type of movie he liked. He liked to do John Hughes type movies,
Right.
Teenage movies, but that was so different from anything he ever did. And we filmed it at my grandmother's house in upstate New York, and all his film crew came up, and Lance was in his element. I've never seen him so happy as when he was going to NYU and doing his filming and hanging out with all the
And then how long
crew.
was it before he became an alcoholic after that? And
12 years later, he died.
12 years later he died.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you more about the things that you've done, and really important, because we want the hope aspect to be here, and I know
Right.
that you're doing so much to help others. So why don't we move on to you?
Welcome, Diana.
Thank you.
Tell us about Josh and Logan.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm sorry for both of you, and the fact that lost one, and you have lost 2 children
Yes.
is
Yeah.
really, and one only in the last
2
last
years.
year.
Yeah.
Wow.
2 years?
Yes.
2 years, yeah.
So I first became a bereaved parent in 2008. Josh was 27 years old, and he was the oldest of 4 children, and our youngest of 4, Logan, lost his best friend, his eldest brother,
Right.
and it was a devastating loss for him.
That
really-
sibling loss is really sometimes
For him,
unacknowledged, but for him was huge.
It was huge.
Right.
And he had Asperger's, which was even more difficult for him. We
And
tried
for
to
people
let
who
him,
don't know what that is, just the little having trouble connecting with people.
exactly,
Yeah.
and speaking about his grief.
Right.
So yeah, that would really come into it. That they do have trouble expressing themselves, and then
Exactly.
losing somebody who probably was a great support to him must have been a
Yes.
huge thing.
It was, and so I have 2 adult children in between these 2. A little bit about Josh. He was the go-to guy in our family. We had a wonderful life.
Now, I forgot to call up a picture of your son. If we could see a picture of your son, Josh, while
Oh,
you talk about
Josh?
him, and
Okay,
then
yes.
and then a
of
picture
Logan.
when we do your other son, and then we're going to come back to Lance's
Okay.
picture. Okay.
So Josh was the go-to guy. He was like my kindred spirit. Nobody could ever tell me that I could live a day without Josh. He struggled with experimenting with drugs. I think he was a child that was really intrigued with the 60s. He was a writer and a musician. He didn't really have need for material things. His friends told me after he passed that homeless people knew him by name because he saw them as people and spent a lot of time communicating with them. Josh was very sensitive in his life, and he truly had difficulty with world politics. It really affected him personally, and so because of that sensitivity, when he had challenges in his life, he began to use. He used.
Now, when did he start using?
I think both of the boys certainly smoked marijuana and drank a bit of alcohol in their teens, but both of them began their use of and then abuse of prescription medications in their 20s. And so Josh became addicted to OxyContin. I remember him crying, telling me that he was addicted and that it was heroin in a pill. I had no clue about that. But then he was able to move from that, and I was very proud of him of that, but he went right into alcoholism. And so he couldn't forgive himself. He gave a lot to others, but he couldn't forgive himself. Logan was our Peter Pan, very compassionate, sweet young man. He had a great flair and style. He was very courteous and just a delight. He had an uncanny memory, and but he told me the year before he passed that he was, people were making a living off of him by selling prescription pain medication on the street. He had been given medications by
for
doctors, but they made him feel weird, and the pain medications made him feel okay. And both of the boys were in residential treatment for months.
Now, I think this is an important thing because your son was in residential treatment too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that just a little. When was your son in residential?
The year before he died.
Okay, and
He was in a rehab. It was basically, I didn't know anything about rehabs, and so I didn't even know how to look for a rehab. So he found this rehab, and I said, okay, he was willing to go. I was so glad, but it was like $15,000 for the month. And basically all they did was take him to AA meetings, and they had a gym they went to, and they had very little, they didn't have a therapist.
Yeah.
So I feel like they were just doing something he could have done on his own.
And both of your kids went to rehab?
Both of them, during their the highest point in their addiction, they both willingly went into treatment for months, and they achieved sobriety. And but then, you know, people who go into treatment are often the most vulnerable, because with one use, then they pass, and that's exactly what happened with both of the boys.
And with both of the boys, after they came out of treatment, they passed.
About 6 months
I mean, don't they tell them in treatment? I mean, you know, how can that happen? I mean, if they had spent money on treatment, don't they tell them?
Well, I have a theory about that. It's really all that I have been thinking of since their passing, because I really was uneducated at the time. My theory is that when you're in treatment, you know, you can't make someone who feels that bad about themselves because they use, you can't make them feel any worse than they already feel. And when you're in a treatment program that does not include the mental health component and dual diagnosis, oftentimes these treatment centers say that they have therapists and doctors, but they don't. And Logan was in a $30,000 a month facility, and they gave him medications that gave him tremors, and we were aware of the tremors. He had Asperger's, he didn't have patients, the doctor wasn't coming. He walked himself to the local hospital emergency room and was given medication, and then the treatment center wouldn't take him back, and he was on the streets of Southern California.
What I think is so important, Gloria, too, and why both of you are here today, because you've taken what you've learned through your experience, and obviously you were fighting a battle that you both feel like you couldn't win that battle for your own children, but now maybe you can help others in the future. So I really want to make sure we talk on this, because you both do such fantastic work. And I'll start with you, Nancy. Maybe we can put Lance's picture up while you're talking about this. Obviously, you're a regional coordinator for the Compassionate Friends.
And it's for my chapter.
That's right. She's your regional coordinator. That's right.
Coordinator.
And you do such terrific work there, but both of you work with trying to, this epidemic of substance-related losses, of really trying to make a difference. So talk a little bit about your work with the Compassionate Friends, Nancy, and then how you work to help other families who might be going through this.
Well, with the Compassionate Friends, when I first went, I went to my first conference in Oklahoma City.
Yes.
And that's when I met Barbara Allen, who's very involved in substance abuse workshops. So I started my own workshop, which is a panel of parents that have suffered the loss of a child through a substance abuse. And we get, I mean, it's unbelievable the number of parents that it has grown through the years, especially at night when we do our support groups and when we get together at night. And those groups have gotten bigger and bigger, and from all walks of life too. I mean, you see that it's not just certain.
So that giving back's
economic.
really important, and I know I talked to you earlier, and you said for people who've had a loss that are watching this show, being able to move into that giving back kind of thing. And you've been doing some marches in Washington or something?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on the steering committee for the Fed Up Coalition, requiring a federal response to the opioid crisis. I think what people don't understand as a society is that we're losing the equivalent of a jetliner going down every single day. And as a society, we absolutely would not tolerate that. And we can't continue to tolerate this. It's just tearing up so many families, and we're losing a generation of young people. Not only young people, but certainly for us, that's the important.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what gave you hope after the loss? What have you seen on your journey? How many years has it been for you?
10.
10 years. And what have you seen on the journey?
On the journey, well, in the beginning, I went right away to a Compassionate Friends meeting, and basically that gave me hope. Just seeing that people did survive. And it's amazing to me that, you know, Lance died from an accident while driving, intoxicated. One of the fathers that helped me the most was a father whose daughter had gotten killed by a drunk driver. And it's amazing that he reached out to me, but he was the one that told me, and we were at a meeting, because I was so worried about doing everything that everybody told me to do, that I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do. And that was such a simple little thing.
You're right.
But that was like the world that just got lifted over off my shoulders, just having someone say that. And that was the beginning. When I saw what he could do for me, I felt like maybe I can do this for somebody else. So I became a chapter leader and then a regional, and I see every meeting what we do to help others.
Yeah.
Well, then Diana, and you're doing, we're heavily involved, I know, with Shatterproof. Talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening on a national level to try to help addicts who maybe had low-level crimes.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Alan, it must be kind of, when people are watching this, people must be scared that have had a child die, that they're going to have another one, and here you are, a person who's had that happen. I mean, tell us what you've been doing and how.
Well, first, when I first experienced loss, I learned a few things right off. One was that I was not in control as a mother for. I thought I was in control. And I never thought that I could still be standing, and yet I was. And so I knew, as bizarre as this sounds, I knew when Logan left us that I would stand and that I could use their voices for good. And
But you didn't know it with the first one, right?
well, no, what I did know is that love does not die.
Right.
And for me, that's been huge. And I've started my own organization, Love Ever After, Loss from Substance Use, because I feel very strongly that we still have to love our children in some way to heal. That doesn't go away. It's not the kind of love you can give to another child or a grandchild. It always just belongs to them. So I have, in my workshops with the Compassionate Friends, I try to talk to parents like us and have them think about directing their love into a meaningful way that will put them in connection with their child. For me, it's advocacy, because I feel so strongly about it, and that's why I'm an ambassador for Shatterproof. And I feel that I can educate, because what you learn is that you're not an island. This is happening all around you.
You were talking about that earlier. There's a lot of shame and guilt, and we don't even know people in our community have a substance abuse problem. You were saying the month your son died, 20 kids died or something? Was that right?
Well, so the awareness and legislative changes are changing exponentially now. It's all over the media, and we've been fortunate to participate in the RX Summit in Atlanta a month ago.
And what is that, the RX Summit?
That was a meeting of leaders. President Obama came.
Awesome.
And the directors of the CDC, the FDA, the DEA, and bipartisan support from our legislators to make a change.
And we're actually, because I think it's changing focus now to one of the things we talked about, which I think is important, is like people who had substance-related problems, drug abuse, addicts who had felonies that were nonviolent, of allowing them now to be able to work and to have, go into drug courts and different avenues now to where they can get their life back, to get out of that cycle where they get out of jail and they've got this felony record that tags them. I mean, there are some real changes and some real hope of being able to help people that get caught in that cycle. And I know you're at the forefront, and Shatterproof is.
And there were some other things as well, that being one of them, having access to naloxone, whether it be with an injectable or with a spray, that goes hand in hand with the 911.
For people who are watching, the naloxone can actually stop somebody from dying of a heroin overdose.
It pushes them out, and they have a chance.
But they don't carry it with them for many reasons.
Right.
But in addition to that, there's some really, really important things that are changing legislatively, and one is the prescription drug monitoring program, and it's not designed to keep people who have chronic pain from receiving their medication, but what it does do is it will change people being able to make a living off of selling drugs on the street by having received a prescription in this town and that town and over the state line. And in the United States now, all but one state, Missouri, we all have prescription drug monitoring programs, and we are hoping to have it be mandatory so that providers and pharmacists will have to look at that first.
One thing that they told me, Ellen, and I don't think you were around, both of them were saying that old people, or older people, I'm an old people, but sell their drugs.
Yes, they do.
I didn't realize that.
It's
to
yes.
support themselves. I mean, I'm like, that's an amazing thing, because I always wonder how these drugs all get out on the street. So I wanted to ask each of you, if you had some advice for somebody who has lost a child to drug addiction, what would it be?
I would say, first of all, speak out. I think I have to say, when I was a chapter leader, it kind of changed our group, because I told my story, and there was a lot of people I noticed would write down when they signed in. They wouldn't put how their child died.
Right.
And I think just one person speaking out can get other people speaking out.
Because there's a lot of shame and guilt around this, right?
It is a stigmatized loss.
It's a stigmatized loss, and because a lot of people think it is a moral failing.
Right.
We were talking about that earlier. It is not a moral failing.
It is not a moral failing.
No, I think that's an important
So I would
word.
say that that's the most important thing. And I did want to say that if anybody wanted to watch Lance's film, it's on, help me,
Vimeo.
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 And what's the name of it again?
Time's Up by Lance Jaraka.
Okay.
Time's
and what's
Up
your
by
advice?
Lance Jaraka.
Well, I would say that my belief is that the shame and the stigma and the secrecy is what got my two boys long before the last drug did. And we were very open and communicated well with our children. But I think we need to speak out, and we need to be proactive so as to make the discussion within your own home easier for someone who is suffering with addiction.
Great. Diana and Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show. It's just been an amazing show, and I have learned so much from you guys, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it has.
Well, Alan, it's just been incredible, hasn't it? Talking to them?
A lot of information. It's a heavy, heavy subject.
We could do 3 more shows on this, actually.
We could. You know, I think something Gloria and I it's a kind of a theme in all of our shows, but it's really profound today. People that have had such tragedy and dealt with such loss, to watch them find hope and to take their loss and to take that pain, and as Diana said so well, to kind of feed off of that love, and then to go out and help other families, not only who are grieving, but the work that they're doing in advocacy to help make changes. And we need to make these changes.
And they march on Washington and all sorts of things. It's amazing.
They are, yeah.
But you know, I didn't know these ladies before, and I know you did from Compassionate Friends, but what impressed me was how happy they are and cheerful and excited about life.
Yeah.
Even with all their tragedy. And they're a little further down the road of life, and I know you've got a song that you're going to be singing for us.
I am. You know, the song, and I know it's one I do for you a lot, called A Little Farther Down the Road, but I think it just dovetails with what Open to Hope and the Compassionate Friends are all about. And for people who might be watching who are deep in their grief and feel like there really isn't hope, and that everything is going to be as bleak and as painful as it is right now, to look at us and to lean on people like Diana and Nancy, to know that a little farther down the road, you will see the sun again. You can find hope again, and that hope can come from certainly helping others as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed. You wrote the words and music to all your music that you do, and it's amazing, Alan. And Mitch Carmody, talk about him, because he's going to be signing for the show with you.
Mitch is going to do interpretive sign language for me, but I've been very blessed. I've been a songwriter my whole life. And I've just been writing about the journey every step of the way, and this particular song means a lot to me, and because it just really does talk about that. We take one step at a time, and you know, we breathe and we just keep going, and grief can take us to some pretty amazing places.
Yeah.
So I'll go do the song.
All right.
All right.
And we want to thank you for watching the Open to Hope show today. And Heidi and I, and my daughter, who's usually my co-host on here, always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And also, please tell a friend or neighbor about this show. You can change lives by letting people know about organizations and people that have gone on to do amazing things. And God bless. And now we'll hear from Alan.
I know those tears you're crying. I've been in your shoes. You feel like there's no use in trying, like there's nothing left to lose. You take one step forward, you move 2 steps back. You may not see it now, but it won't always be like that. A little farther down the road, and you'll see the sun again. A little farther down the road, you look back at where you've been, and you'll see how far you've come, and you'll find the strength to go a little farther down the road. This journey is not easy. It's a winding road filled with twists and turns. But you can make it, believe me. In time, you'll learn. A greater love comes from your deepest pain, and there's power in that love to help you rise again. A little farther down the road, and you'll see the sun again. A little farther down the road, you look back at where you've been, and you'll see how far you've come, and you'll find the strength to go a little farther down the road. It's holding on, it's bittersweet, it's healing slow, then finding peace. A little farther down the road, and you'll see the sun again. A little farther down the road, you look back at where you've been, and you'll see how far you've come, and you'll find the strength to go a little farther